To buy or not to buy, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of your neighbours as you crank your 100-watt Marshall at 1 AM.
Sorry.
Or whether we should start modelling. So I was about to take the plunge and buy a Kemper, and then I saw that Neural DSP were about to bring out a new product called the Quad Cortex. So of course the first thing I do is go onto YouTube and have a look at all the influencers and see what they're having to say about this new device. In that introduction, as much for a record for myself as to the kind of sounds I can get now without modelling as such, without a dedicated modelling unit. That's the 4 amp sims I tend to use, as I can plug straight in with no latency. So I've got 4 UAD plugins I use mainly: the Friedman Bucks and Betty, the Fuchs Overdrive Special, the Fender Tweed Deluxe, and I've got the Marshall Plexi, the basic one. So I was about to hit buy on getting a Kemper when I saw these videos popping up about this new unit. In the back of my mind I was worried about getting a Kemper because it's nearly 10 years old, the technology, and I know they keep updating the software, but I kind of likened it to getting a MacBook that's 10 years old but running the latest operating system compared to getting a brand new one for basically the same kind of money. I know that's not a direct analogy, but it seemed that there's going to be a next generation, maybe a Kemper 2 or another product, and then this appears. So looking through these reviews was a bit of a roller coaster of emotions. Now these influencers, it's a different way of looking at products to buy pre-release. In the olden days you'd really just have the guitar magazines, so there were a couple of UK ones and the imported US ones, and they'd all be reviews written by the journalists who worked for these publications. But now we've got these kind of self-made YouTubers who are influencers, and they have a big say on what people buy, so they get sent these pre-released products. The first I knew about this was when the Paul Davids notification popped up saying, is this going to replace my Kemper? So I was immediately interested because I was about to buy a Kemper. Well, I watched his review, and as per usual his video looked fantastic. It was a great video, but after watching his video I was a bit disappointed. I was left thinking, this unit isn't really an improvement on the Kemper. There were several reasons for that. Firstly, he seemed to have unearthed a problem that when you switch between presets you get a dropout in audio in between. Secondly, he showed the display saying that you couldn't see any detail on the main display. He then also showed a problem where he had to keep switching the output to outputs 3 and 4 as every preset defaulted to 1 and 2, which he wasn't using. The last thing, and the thing that really put me off, was his capture of the amps on the Quad Cortex compared to his profiling he was doing on the Kemper. In the A/B tests, to my ears, the Quad Cortex didn't sound as good. I went away thinking about this, and then I thought to myself, well, I'm sure that if you're using this unit correctly, then you're not going to get this audio dropout. I'm sure that people at Neural DSP didn't think, right, let's get one of these units off to David's. I'm sure he won't notice that audio dropout. And I started thinking to myself that maybe it's just the way he's using it. I'm guilty of this myself. When I get something new, I try and make it work like the previous thing I had. And he was perhaps trying to crowbar his workflow that he has in the Kemper onto this new unit. So once I'd had a think about this, the next notification that popped up was Rhett Shaw's video. First thing I noticed was Paul Davies and Rexall both seem to be using Novo guitars. These quite cool looking guitars that look like they're fashioned out of old kitchen tables. But they both had the same pickups, so not a lot of variation there, so I guess it was a fairly fair comparison. Now what Rhett is really good at, it seems to me, is capturing the guitar sounds. He mic'd up one of his amps, an orange amp I believe, and he captured it into the Quad Cortex, and I have to say there seems to be very little difference between the capture and the actual amp after he'd done it. He also addressed some of the issues that Paul had raised in his video. I mean, not directly, but by using the unit and appearing to have more of a handle on how it was going to be used. So not switching between presets, which I don't have the unit, but it seems to me that's kind of like switching between applications rather than actually switching within an application to get a different setting within that. So next, the Pete Thorne review. I really enjoyed this review. He played a piece at the start that he'd written, and it had a massive range of different guitar sounds. He played about 20 different guitars on it. It was fantastic. It was great to see like a proper player really putting it through its paces, and by this point I'm thinking I've got to get one of these. So finally I got to Rabia's review. So on the first video I saw, he went through a lot of the presets, mainly the ones that he'd created, and I have to say they sounded absolutely fantastic, and he's a great player as well, so it really helps when someone's playing well into one of these things and knows how to get a sound. And what's great with Rabia's video is he really seems to know how to use the equipment inside out. If he's created presets on it, he's got a lot of experience with it, so he's not just got it, unboxed it and sort of finding his way. I then found another video. Now this was actually a remake because he got criticised by people in the comments. It sounded like it got quite heated and quite rude, but he'd not done the final part of the profiling on the Kemper when he was A-Bing with the Quad Cortex. There's a kind of refinement process which he hadn't done, so he remade the video. I only saw the remade one. Now in these direct A-B comparisons, he did a clean sound, a kind of mid-gain sound and a high-gain sound. And I have to say that to my ears, the Quad Cortex was streets ahead of the Kemper. He described how it felt more like the amp, and I could kind of sense that. I mean, obviously it's difficult when you're not playing, but I could kind of sense how it felt. That the whole sound seemed more 3D. Difficult to describe, but the only time I've had a similar experience, I had a Vibra King and I put it against a sort of similarly configured Blues DeVille just as I was selling it, which was probably the wrong thing to do in front of the person I was selling it to, but the Vibra King, it had this sort of 3D sound, this depth that the Blues DeVille didn't have, point to point versus hand wired. I wouldn't have believed it till I heard it, but it was quite clear and it's quite obvious how much better the hand wired amp was, and that's kind of what it sounded like to me. The Quad Cortex seems to be able to capture that depth and that feel. I don't know what it is, but it seems to be the next level of technology, something that the Kemper's not quite getting. On the surface the tones are very similar, they're both accurate, but there seemed to be something in the detail in the Quad Cortex that wasn't there in the Kemper. Also the Kemper seems to add some bits that it adds some compression, adds some lower mid, which makes it sound less like the Source, but probably more flattering. It maybe compresses it. Some people have said that it adds a bit more gain. So all in all, I think it looks like a pretty good unit. I'd like to know what other people think. I'm going to keep looking at reviews and see what people say. I guess we've always been at the mercy of the reviewer's opinion, and the reviewers in the past were always people who work for guitar magazines, I guess. But now the influencers' credentials are really based on how popular their YouTube channels are, rather than how well versed they are with the equipment. So let me know what you think in the comments. Are you going to get one? Am I going to get one? I don't know yet. I'm very tempted. I think it's time to move on to the next stage. Are we getting to the point where we don't need these amps anymore? Well, we do need them because somebody's got to profile them or capture them. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, hit like, leave me a comment, and I'll see you on the next video.